The Murder That Inspired a Hollywood Movie. The screams inside the quiet Benedict Canyon house were so piercing they seemed to split the night in two. The peace of the Hollywood Hills was shattered as chaos filled Sharon Tate's home. 8 months pregnant, she begged for her life while her friends were tied and cornered. Strangers with knives and guns moved through rooms as if carrying out a mission. The record player spun calmly in the background, its music clashing with terror. When the first blade came down and the first gunshot rang out, it marked one of the darkest nights Los Angeles had ever known. Hollywood itself, many would later say, lost its innocence that night. But how did a group of young wanderers, once dismissed as harmless, become cold executioners in a star's home? Charles Manson was not a powerful man by size or wealth, but his voice carried a strange weight. He spoke in riddles, twisting songs and words into dark prophecies that young people, searching for meaning, clung to. In the late 1960s, America was shifting. Youth rebelled against their parents' rules, looking for freedom and belonging. Manson took that hunger and molded it into loyalty. His group became the family. They lived on a broken-down ranch outside Los Angeles, surviving on scraps and drugs. To the outside world, they looked like wandering hippies. Inside, Manson's words were gospel. He taught an impending race war he called Helter Skelter, a name borrowed from a Beatles song, twisted into his apocalyptic vision. And his family believed. Among the family, young women like Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and men like Charles Tex, Watson gave Manson complete control. He told them they were chosen to bring about change, that violence was necessary to ignite his prophecy. Love and music gave way to talk of blood and sacrifice. Manson's orders became darker, but the family obeyed without question. When he told them to kill, they did not argue, hesitate, or think twice. To them, he wasn't just a man, he was a prophet, and his commands were destiny. The family lived cut off from reality, drowning in devotion. Their isolation fed Manson's control, turning young idealists into willing instruments of terror. In Benedict Canyon, Sharon Tate lived a very different life. Married to director Roman Polanski, she was Hollywood's rising star. That summer, with Polanski away in Europe, Sharon surrounded herself with friends. Jay Sebring, her ex and a famous hairstylist, Abigail Folger, the coffee heiress, and Wojciech Frykowski, a writer, stayed close by, keeping her company as she awaited her baby. The home on Cielo Drive was filled with laughter, warmth, and anticipation. But that house held dark meaning for Manson. It had once been rented by music producer Terry Melcher, the man who had rejected Manson's attempts at a music career. Though Melcher had moved out, the house itself became Manson's symbol of rejection and revenge. Sharon and her friends had no idea their home was marked. On August 8, 1969, Manson's cold instructions sealed their fate. He told Tex Watson, Atkins, Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian to go to the Cielo Drive house and totally destroy everyone in it. His words were sharp and final. That night, the group drove through the winding Hollywood Hills, headlights cutting the darkness. They parked nearby, carrying rope, knives, and a gun. Linda stayed outside as lookout, while the others climbed toward the house. Inside, Sharon and her friends played music, talking softly as warm night air drifted through the windows. To them, it was just another evening. To the intruders, it was the beginning of carnage. They cut the phone lines, silenced the dogs barking, and slipped inside. The peace shattered in seconds. Orders barked, ropes pulled tight, and strangers filled the rooms with menace. Sharon, wide-eyed with disbelief, begged them not to hurt her baby. But their faces were blank, calm with the eerie conviction of people carrying out a higher command. Jay Sebring tried to reason with them, but Tex Watson silenced him with chilling words. "You're all going to die." The soft record player spun on as the nightmare began. The family's victims were forced into corners, tied, beaten, terrorized. The calm home of a star turned into a place of fear. And outside, Linda Kasabian stood frozen, hearing the screams, torn between running and staying. In the chaos, Abigail Folger broke free. Her instincts drove her outside, desperate for life. She ran into the yard, chased by Patricia Krenwinkel. The night filled with the sound of running feet and sharp cries. Neighbors heard fragments of noise, but dismissed them as late-night revelry in the hills. They had no idea death was unfolding nearby. Abigail fought with everything she had, but she was pursued relentlessly. Inside, terror still gripped the house. Sharon cried for her baby. Frykowski struggled violently. Jay had already fallen, and the shadows kept moving. Wojciech Frykowski managed to wrestle free. Bloody but determined, he stumbled outside, his body driven by sheer will to survive. For a brief moment, freedom seemed near, but Tex Watson was faster. He chased Frykowski, tackling him with brutal force. Their fight was savage, the desperation of one man against the cold determination of another. Frykowski clawed, kicked, and struck, but he was overwhelmed. His cries echoed into the night. The canyon absorbed them, distant, faint, unheard by those who could have helped. Inside, Sharon remained bound, tears streaking her face. She listened to horror around her, her friends silenced one by one. Her voice cracked as she pleaded, "Please, let me have my baby." Those words, later remembered by witnesses, became the most haunting moment of that night. Susan Atkins stood over her, knife in hand, repeating Manson's words. She told Sharon she had no mercy. In that terrible silence, innocents faced cruelty and lost. The record kept spinning. The walls absorbed the final screams, and the house became still again. The family scrawled words on the walls in blood, cryptic symbols of Manson's prophecy. Then they walked calmly into the night, as though they had finished a task. Linda Kasabian remained paralyzed, her face pale, knowing she had witnessed horror she could never erase. The next morning, the murders were discovered. Detectives faced a scene so brutal, it shocked even seasoned officers. The world soon learned that Sharon Tate, her unborn child, and her friends were dead. Hollywood recoiled in fear. But for Manson, it was only the beginning. The very next evening, Manson struck again. He took his followers to the home of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. Though he didn't strike the blows, he directed the attack, choosing the house and leaving his family to carry out his commands. The couple, bound and terrified, were subjected to the same merciless violence. The family scrawled death to pigs and rise on the walls, echoing Manson's prophecy of helter-skelter. When they left, Los Angeles had endured 2 massacres in 2 nights. The killings spread fear like wildfire. Celebrities locked their doors, hired guards, and no longer trusted even their friends. If Sharon Tate could be slaughtered in her own home, no one was safe. Hollywood's glittering illusion of security vanished overnight. The city of dreams became a city of dread. Detectives worked under immense pressure as fear spread. But at first, the Tate and LaBianca murders weren't even linked. The brutality seemed random, impossible to understand. The crime scenes baffled detectives. Strange words painted in blood, bizarre details, and the randomness of the attacks left investigators with more questions than answers. The press swarmed, demanding updates, while citizens demanded safety. Weeks passed with no arrests. Whispers about a cult began to circulate, and slowly, attention turned toward Charles Manson and the family's ranch. The key to solving the case emerged from within. Linda Kasabian, the family's lookout that night, was racked with guilt. Haunted by the screams she heard, she came forward. Her testimony painted a chilling picture of Manson's control and the cold obedience of his followers. Without her, the case may have dragged on far longer. With her, the truth finally broke into the open. The trial that followed was unlike anything America had ever seen. Manson and his followers turned the courtroom into chaos, smiling eerily, chanting, carving symbols into their foreheads. Manson etched an X into his skin, later transforming it into a swastika. His followers copied him, displaying loyalty even as the world recoiled. Reporters filled the seats, fascinated and horrified. The world watched, trying to understand how one man could command such blind devotion. At last, the verdict came. Guilty. Manson, Watson, Atkins, and Krenwinkel were sentenced to death. But when California abolished the death penalty, their sentences shifted to life in prison. Linda Kasabian walked free, granted immunity for her testimony, though forever haunted by what she had seen. Justice was served, but the scars remained. Sharon Tate's death became a symbol of innocence lost. Hollywood mourned her beauty, her career cut short, and the child she never got to hold. Her name lived on, tied forever to the brutality that stole her life. Friends, family, and fans remembered her not just as a victim, but as a star who represented all the promise of Hollywood. Even behind bars, Manson remained a figure of fear and fascination. His interviews became infamous, filled with strange rants and unsettling stares. He spoke of control, chaos, and his twisted visions, still holding influence over some who saw him as a prophet. The world watched him as a symbol of madness, contained but never erased. Words twisted into poison. Even after Manson's death in 2017, the shadow of his crimes lingers. The fear, the fascination, and the questions remain. Could it happen again? Could another man manipulate others into carrying out horror in his name? The strange case of the murder that inspired a Hollywood movie will never fade. It remains etched in history as the night when Hollywood's dream turned into its darkest nightmare.